Okay, so me and the kid came back over here to do a video today. I was kind of just hanging out over in my office and wasn't sure if I was going to. It's like, no, I need to. So here we are. Today's, okay, I guess the shitty update. We'll go with that. So, following my father's shitting on the floor the other day and leaving it, okay, so that day, I got after him and told him he had to clean it up, right? And he had the bottle of spray, he had some paper towels or towel or something. I don't know how much he actually put forth into that task. I think there's a good chance he might have just lay there petting the floor. Because he didn't do for shit on cleaning it up. So, yesterday, I mean, obviously the house still smelled like shit, and it got really hot in the afternoon, and my mom and I were talking and decided to go ahead and turn the air conditioning back on. It's like, so the downfall of this is it's going to really make the house smell like shit. And she just looked at me and I said, because he didn't do for shit on cleaning it up. Since it's supposed to be in the 90s the next couple days, we couldn't not turn the air conditioner back on. And so since that was the case, I went ahead and broke out the carpet cleaner, which here again is essentially me complying with, his bullshit, because I was expected to fall in line, right? And I resisted a lot. But I did say, I went in there yesterday, I was like, all right. I said, I'm hitting this with the carpet cleaner. I said, if you do this again, I will make your life a living hell until either I move out or you die, depending on which happens first. I did not hear what he said in response, but I wouldn't have cared anyway. I probably would have just gone off on him sooner. A little earlier in the day, before I turned the air conditioning on, I had to go over to the storage unit to grab my little window unit, because if we got the air conditioning on in the house, that means my room's going to get really hot unless I have my own little air conditioner in there, and I don't like being really hot. So I went and got my little AC unit. And I went and got in the truck because it was the first key that I saw and grabbed, and was on, I started backing out the driveway, and I look over and my dad's standing in the door with the door wide open, the glass door, and the little corgi has escaped and is in the front yard and coming to the driveway. And so of course I have to stop and get the dog because, first off, it's my aunt's dog. And God, it would be a horrible thing should something happen to this dog, especially if it was, while they're out of town and on my watch, right? He doesn't give a shit about that. And, my mom had apparently told him to shut the big door to make sure she didn't jump on the other one, because that one doesn't latch right. So rather than shutting the big door, he opened the glass door and let her out. Yeah. And again, yes, the man has had strokes. Multiples. But no, this is not stuff he would have been beyond doing beforehand. It's basically, it's like there's a bigger conniving element to everything that he does, but he's still doing the same shit. It was like before he at least had the capacity to tone it down so it didn't look like he was just being a blatant asshole. Now he just looks like a blatant asshole all the time. So, so it is what it is. But anyway, so I cleaned the carpet, right? Or attempted to. Oh, and before we got to that, before I left the house to go get the window unit, my mom was laying on the couch because my grandma and my cousin had just come over. And we were talking about that, of course, how it was going to smell like shit in there because somebody shit on the floor and left it there and did a piss poor job of attempting to clean it up, even because he wanted somebody else to do it for him. He wanted to do something nasty and me to be forced to have to clean up after him because I can't stand the smell and all that shit, right? And, you know, it led to me having an explosion and going off on him when he had just, you know, shit on the floor and left it and just put a towel on it. Before I left, I said something, or he always tries to make it into this thing where me and my mom are being mean to him by calling him out on something stupid he did or shitty that he did, right? So, you know, I'm going off about how it's going to smell like shit because he shit on the floor and left it on the floor for God knows how long, and then didn't really do for shit on cleaning it up. And, you know, my mom starts in with, we're going to have a talk and, you know, this kind of stuff. And he's, you know, starts in with this poor, pitiful me and everybody, I just can't make anybody happy. I'm just, everybody's mad at me all the time, blah, 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 kind of bullshit. It's like, yeah, when you're doing dumb shit intentionally to force us to have to clean up after your lazy ass, yeah, it's a problem. So I went off about that too. I was like, well, seeing as to how you were running around the house bare-ass naked rather than in your fucking Depends, I said, which you need to be wearing like your life fucking depends on it. I said, because nobody wants to smell it and wants to have to deal with it. You don't want to have to deal with it. So why do we have to? Right? Why is that the thing? You know, and ultimately goes back to that very point on the whole, you know, why I loathe patriarchal religions, because they create monsters like him, right? Where you're just supposed to cater to his bullshit and do everything for him because that's what, you know, that's the life agreement he entered into. And so for us to be bitchy because we don't want to clean up after his dumb ass just for doing stupid shit, he don't like that. You know, he's, I've said on here before that my mom has hated me my whole life. And it's like, it's something that I've always known at like a very deep level. It's like, she might have acted otherwise when other people were around, but it's like the way we got along or lack thereof always very much supported the idea that no, there was nothing. She did not love me at all, you know, and it was nothing shy of loathing, to be honest. It's like, my dad is absolutely no better, right? He's the same damn way on that. So it's like, at some level, even more so because I'm the daughter, right? You know, he chose to marry my mother, entering into the agreement with, you know, with her family, so my grandfather, because going back to that point of how women are like property, right? So, you know, he collected the property from my grandfather, and then, you know, it was just always me and my brother. Like, he's always resented us, and I don't think he's fully really accepted that level of it, because he's still set on wanting to believe the best in our father, and you know, this isn't the dad that I knew and all this stuff. It's like, it's always been there. It's like, you were just so busy getting manipulated by mom that you missed out on the joyous parts of our father. I was like, it's always been there. And you know what, of course, since I've been the family scapegoat anyway, why wouldn't my own parents have a deep underlying loathing of me, and thus have that being one of the driving factors in my existence, in our interactions together, me and them, all that fun stuff. So, you know, especially since he married me off, right? I married my toxic ex, but then that wasn't a good situation. And then my mom fully embraced the hating my ex. And so, of course, they went and picked me up when I needed to be picked up and moved back so I could get a divorce. And mind you, they did it a couple times because I left in December 2017, and I was back up here for 9 months, and then I went back down there for the final hurrah to make it, or to make or break, right? See if it was going to work or if it was going to be its demise. Even though I always knew divorce was on my path, really. So it's like, it made sense. But with everything that my life was feeding me and the conditioning was feeding me, and, like all the bullshit the church wants to spew about, you should avoid divorce at all possible costs. But you just live with the toxic relationships, right? Yeah. Anyway, so he has very much resented me since I've been back. He tried to get rid of me once. And that was, I've talked about that on here a few times too, that was a big part of me realizing that I belonged to nobody but myself, because the one he allowed me to marry, I've talked about how I picked like the worst possible option so that people could say something, right? To see if they would say something. And they didn't. Instead my dad just, all right, let's do it. Marry her off, get rid of her, get her out of the house, kind of a thing. And then, when I was trying to leave my ex, I realized how much of the conditioning with, what I'd grown up with and all the church nonsense that was spewed over the top of it. 'Cause like there too, when I moved back in March 2019 and was in the process of pushing through with the divorce, it was when I finally left and all that fun stuff. There was my grandfather who, within 3 weeks that I had moved back, maybe even less than that, Easter, whatever Easter fell on in 2019, we have a family get together, right? Because that's what you do on the holidays. You get together with family. So we get together over at my aunt's house, and my cousin brought her fiance, and it's the first time he's meeting everybody. And I'm freshly back in the process of going through this divorce. And as my grandfather's sitting at the table doing his usual running his mouth, and, he can never get enough of himself yapping, he starts spouting off with, my family doesn't get divorced. And it led me to just kind of unload. It was like, because I'm not part of this fucking family. I went off, and he's like, well, I didn't mean it like that. And it's like, fuck you. And, I ended up going outside. I didn't expect that it was going to bring the whole day to a screeching halt. It did end up doing that. I just went out to the car to get away from the rest of the family, since, since I just went off on my grandfather, and didn't want to be around him, and didn't really want to have that conversation either. So I went out to the car, and then it ended up being the end of the whole thing. So, then after that, we go home, and I'm standing in the yard throwing the ball for Gidge. There's a wasp trying to find a spot to get in, I think. Deviant little shits. Anyway, so so we go back home. I'm throwing the ball for Gidge, and my grandparents come over, because my grandpa's got to make it right? And he comes outside, and he stands there in the rocks about 15 feet away from me and says, I didn't mean it like that. And I ignored him. I just kept throwing the ball. I heard what he said, and I just kept ignoring him, because it's like, that is not even worthy of a response. I didn't mean it like that. Right? And then my mom's thing after that was, she said something about, him coming out there to make things right or whatever. And it's like, no, I said, all he said was, he didn't mean it like that. And she said, well, you should probably just appreciate it because that's probably the closest to an apology that man's ever said. It's like, that's fucking sad. Because God knows it's not the only time that man has fucked up. But he couldn't even offer a genuine apology. It was, I didn't mean it like that. That, sir, is not an apology. So fuck you and get your ass home. I don't even care. But for my mom to like be coming back at me about how I should just appreciate that because that's the closest thing to an apology he's ever said. It's like, that's a him problem. That is a big him problem. That is not a me problem. But then too, my dad was always watching this asshole pastor. Yeah, I say that because he's one of those that's really, let's just go back to that. There is no there is no hate like Christian love. One of those types where, he's all fire and brimstone and all that bullshit. And at least 2 or 3 occasions I walked into the room when my dad was listening to that dipshit spewing forth whatever and going off about how divorce is bad and all that crap. Like, see, this goes right in on that conditioning piece because it's like, it does not matter how shitty of a situation things were with my ex. Divorce was the thing that was supposed to be avoided, right? At all possible costs. And yet I knew that it was on my path because I wanted to know how people get into the situations that make them feel stuck where they can't get out of it. And so the only way to get that information is to go through the experience yourself. So it's like the ongoing, constant chipping away at who you are because you're constantly made to feel like you're too much for everybody else or you're too sensitive. It's a you problem, right? Because everybody has a problem with you. You're the problem. But yeah. Anyway, going back to that shitty update. So I went ahead and got the carpet cleaner out because I don't want to have to smell shit every single time I walk into the room because the freaking air conditioning's on, right? And we can't don't get any airflow because the fucking air conditioning's on. So I go in there and he definitely had this little low-key, subtle smirk the entire time. And he's sitting there talking to his brothers and sisters probably. I think they had like a group text that they were doing and whatnot. But he was definitely sitting there with a smirk, and it was the fact that I was the one cleaning it up because that was what he wanted. And so I said, I will make your life a living hell if you do this again. And like I said, I don't know what he said, but he said something as he got up and went outside. And I did what I could with it last night. I dumped like a pitcher of hot water on the floor because the lovely thing about our freaking carpet cleaner is when you go forward, it does the wash cycle, right? So it spits out the water as you go forward, but as you bring it back, then it's the dry cycle, and you can't get it to not do the dry cycle. It just does that, right? So it's like, I just want water right now. So I just dumped a pitcher or like half a pitcher of hot water on the floor to get it started, and then was kind of working on it with the other stuff. It made it worse, y'all. Made it worse. I was talking to my aunt this morning, the youngest sister, because she was going to come visit my mom and brought some groceries and whatnot. And I told her about my dad shitting on the floor the other day. And, she was trying to soften the blow so I wouldn't feel bad for him or whatever, or be pissed at him. It's like, no, you can't soften this. It's like this. I don't give a shit that the man has had strokes. He has always been this person at the like deepest levels, because otherwise it wouldn't be there coming out now. Right. So it's like the thing that softened the blow on anything he did before was that me and my brother internalized it. And, we, because of who we are, we tried to be what our family was telling us we must be in order to be acceptable. But then too, I think part of the reason my brother doesn't have the same experience as our father is he's a son, right? So sons are automatically more acceptable because, he's a boy, right? So, so then there's still that underlying hatred on my father's end because I'm the daughter. Especially as I've gotten mouthier in my older age, as I have been doing my healing work and realizing how much of what I've had to heal from was shit that he and my mother did or said or made me believe about myself that, and I've had to be undoing that. I've talked a lot through a lot of videos on all these levels of this shit too. But that underlying hatred, that's always been there. It is not new. And like yesterday when my mom was going at him too because he literally shit on the floor and left it there and then didn't really clean it up. Although I will say he did turn around and lay in it later that day, even though he knew he didn't clean it up very well and hadn't done for shit on doing that. So yeah. But it's not that he had anything or there was anything wrong with what he did as far as he's concerned. He was just pissed that my mom and I were getting after him about it. But that's the thing that pisses me off the most about him. It's just when he gets his way, it's that smirk. And it's like, some people might not even notice it. But it's like, I cannot not notice it now that I know exactly what's going on. It's like, like when he took himself off of all of his meds for the 2 weeks and then ended up having the strokes, right? So in that time period, so he has the strokes because he took himself off the meds, which I think we discovered that he took himself off the meds when he had his eye surgery. The eye surgery was something, brain surgery technically. They went in to take a piece of the artery in his eye to see if he had like some kind of condition that they said it came back that he didn't, but all the doctors that were involved with it were pretty sure that he did, so they thought it was a false negative on that end. However, being a brain surgery, it is also a potential contributing factor of strokes, right? So, which we didn't know until after the fact, right? So he has this eye surgery on Thursday, I believe, and on Friday, we end up in the ER because he's having the stroke, or strokes. Before we left the house, so my mom, who wasn't supposed to be driving back then either, I hear her talking to him and sounding all agitated and whatnot. And when I come out of my room, she's talking about she's going to take him to the hospital because she thinks he's having a stroke. It's like, why would you drive him to the hospital if you think he's having a stroke? Why would you not call the fire department and have somebody come out and pick him up, and maybe they'll know where he needs to go if it's a stroke. So I just kind of bypassed that whole bullshit. It's like, first off, you're not supposed to be driving. So I went and called 911, and then I went and when they were asking all the questions, it's like, I don't know these answers because I don't like these assholes. So I ended up having to hand the phone to my mom for a little bit anyway, so she could actually deal with it, because I just didn't want to ask him the questions. I honestly didn't care. But anyway, they send the fire trucks and the ambulance down, and I was outside. I had got the dogs put up, And then I was outside kind of holding the door for everybody when they went in, and then I was just kind of staying out of the way because there was a lot of people in the house, right? And I hear my mom say, well, you should ask my daughter. It's like, oh, fuck. So I go back in there, and she's talking to one of the EMTs, and he says that she's wanting to go to Hancock Hospital, but they don't have the setup for strokes. They wanted to take them to Community East because that's one of the hospitals for, that specializes in stroke stuff, right? So I just looked at him. He's trying to explain it, and I was like, then take him there. I was like, duh, easy. If that's the place we're going to ultimately end up at anyway, just bypass the dumb shit with, let's take him here, and they don't know shit, so they can't do anything about it, but they can send us to this other place or whatever. It's like, let's just skip that, go to the other way. And he kind of came back like he thought I was going to argue for my mom's position a little bit more. I was just like, no, I'm not. It's like, I'm already pissed that I think I'd been asleep for like 5 minutes, and then I hear them messing around, and then it's like, fuck's sake. Oh, stupid phone calls. Potential spam again. Still not going to answer it. Anyway, but yeah, so, but that day, I think it was right before the firefighters got there. He said he had to go to the bathroom before they went anywhere. And so she tells him, well, we'll just go to this bathroom because it's closer, which is my bathroom. And the thing with my bathroom is he got told he was not allowed to use my bathroom when I first moved back because he would go in there and pee on the floor and not clean up after himself because that's what he does everywhere. And I, go in there at like 2:00 in the morning and step on it, and I'm pissed. And I went off, and then my mom was like, well, you can't go into that one anymore. She said, you still have 2 others. She said, you can go to the one in our room, you can go to the one in the family room. It's like, this is hers, stay out of it, right? So, and that was only because I went off about it. So then when he was given permission to use it, of course he peed on the floor again. But there again, just like when he was walking back to my bathroom, I saw that same damn smirk on his face. It's like, it's like I've said before, the man basically has a death wish, but the biggest wish is to be as bad and as worthless as a human being as he possibly can in order to force everybody else to have to clean up after him before he goes, right? So he wants to die. He doesn't care about living. I mean, he's proven that by, all the times he's taken himself off his meds, because that wasn't the first time. My mom's gotten after him for that for several times, right? But that was the time, paired with the brain surgery. That was the one that ended up in they said he had multiple strokes on both sides of his brain, right? So then the last time around, when he took himself off the CPAP machine for 2 weeks, then he has another stroke. So it's almost like he does it somewhat intentionally, right? Because he chose not to do the thing. He chose not to do the other thing. So he doesn't give a shit. He didn't give a shit about anything except for being as difficult as possible before something happens. And honestly, I don't give a shit if he goes. I don't, because I realize now that he's been a huge part of why I have had so much healing to do, right? Because he was right there with my mom and saying and doing the dumb shit to make me feel bad and make me feel like, I didn't have value, or like I was too much or too sensitive or whatever, and, my brother and I have had this conversation before where, now mind you, me and my brother are really close because ultimately we've been each other's biggest allies in this whole thing. But that said, throughout the years growing up, we also inadvertently contributed to the toxic family, and we hurt each other by going along with them in a lot of ways. an example of this is when my brother and I were having this conversation about, about me marrying the asshole, right? I said, I picked what I thought was the absolute worst that I knew people would not like because I needed somebody outside of me to say, that is not the one. Do not marry that one. And, because that's what church made me think that I was supposed to do. Right? I needed somebody outside of me to save me, right? To be the one capable of making the decisions for me, because I couldn't do that for myself, because that's what church wanted me to believe. So, when I told my brother, it's like, I needed I said the only two people that could have said something and made a difference was either my dad or my brother. And my brother said he felt like he had been gone long enough and we weren't super close at that time because, he was with the Air Force and, scattered around the country at various times. Mississippi, Arizona, Texas, and those kind of places. And then, when he came back for the wedding, he felt like he didn't like him, like from the get-go, but he didn't feel like he had any right to say anything because he hadn't been around for so long. But for me, I just needed either him or my dad to say something. But what he said when we first had this conversation was, well, Dad probably felt like, he said something to the effect of didn't want to set me off, right? Because I've had big emotions and all that stuff in my lifetime, right? I've been too much for people. And, he was probably afraid of setting me off. So it's like, that is exactly one of those things too. It's like, even, in that moment, me and my brother are having this conversation, and it was not his intention to make me feel shit about anything at that point in time. He was just, responding to what I was saying to him. But at the same time, that piece of didn't know how you were going to react because I was capable of having big explosions. As everybody had seen in middle school and high school, I would sometimes go off because there was a lot of hurt and a lot of anger, and I just was constantly told I was too much for people, right? Too sensitive. So it was a me problem, right? So when I was so like on that end, and going back to my brother, just him saying that was one of those things that would have confirmed it's a me problem had I not been in the mindset of realizing that there's more to this. It was before I really started. I mean, it was early in the healing process. I was still working on that, but it was still just one of those things, like the way it came up. It's like, that's an example of how we've kind of inadvertently hurt each other by going along with the toxic family dynamics, which we were raised in, because we didn't really know what was going on. We were, uh-oh. Corgi almost fell off the bed. Right, so, and we both did that kind of stuff to each other, and it wasn't meant to be any kind of, hit against the other person. It was just, well, because of this, but, that's one of those underlying contributing factors of you're too much, you're too sensitive, you're the problem, right? So, so there again, why when I started really noticing things and setting boundaries and then, disconnecting further on that end, once I started sharing with him what was going on, because going back to that point of how I, when I started the YouTube thing, I wouldn't tell him about it because he would have, he would have freaked out because there was a possibility that I would say something that would embarrass the family, right? So going back to that, the Jerry Wise lingo is the narcissistic family super self, I believe is what he calls it, where, the family tries to get you to fall in line just so you aren't making waves, right? So if I'm healing and doing my healing work by doing videos and putting that out in the world for anybody to find, that puts the family at risk of embarrassment, right? And God forbid you have that happen. So when I first started doing it, it's like I could not tell him anything. And it was a long time before I started talking to him about it. But, you know, once I started setting boundaries with the family and pulling my energy back, then I started pointing out to him what I was noticing. And I started setting him up with the stuff that I was, you know, was helpful, like the obsidian, right? The obsidian. Mookaite. Mookaite's one of my favorites now because I think that one is kind of specifically. See, okay, for the Mookaite, I woke up at like 4 o'clock in the morning one night, and as I was waking up, it was like somebody whispered in my ear, Mookaite Jasper. And so my first thought when I'm awake is Mookaite Jasper. So it's like, that's clearly important, and I need to look into that. So, you know, I did. When I looked it up as far as what it was for, it was talking about something with disconnecting from toxic family stuff and generational curse type things. And sorry, disconnecting from the toxic family is the big key. It's like, yes, give me that. Right. So I got this necklace. The page was like KD Gems or something. And I got some like palm stones. I got a red one and a yellow one and some bracelets. I was like loading up on the Mookaite. And, you know, once I started helping my brother with the making the connections for himself, seeing it, and then started saying, hey, this stuff's helpful for setting boundaries, right? So then he starts looking into it. He's got his own little stash now too. And a lot of them I've given to him because I realized that they were, for specific things that with our family, I knew he would need to be protected from as well. So I started, sharing stuff with him and, like the Mookaite. I had the 2 palm stones. I was like, take your pick. And then the other one went to the short-term friend. That, I mean, he's still a friend of my brother's. He's still a good guy, but I'm just not trying to have distractions pulling me out of what I'm supposed to be doing, kind of a thing. So then like the Mookaite, it's like, it works. Because then my brother starts noticing more and more of the stuff. Then he has to go to his therapy group because of the work debacle, because the narcissistic boss that triggered a whole bunch of stuff because of the narcissistic upbringing, or the narcissistic parents in the upbringing. And, once he was in this group setting, getting things confirmed that I'd been talking to him about, and I was like, huh, even still, like sometimes I'll say something to him and sometimes he'll come back and, he'll say he started making this connection. We were having this conversation the other day, started making this connection and realizing that, the stuff our mom would say to him was actual manipulation tactics. It's like, yes, it's like he heard it from me, he heard it from his therapy group, but then there was like that other level where he really realized it himself and it was like, shit, what the fuck is this all about, right? So it's the whole new level of really coming to appreciate the fact of how much manipulation you underwent and didn't really realize what it was because we weren't getting beaten or anything. So we thought it was like a completely normal situation, right? We're not getting hit. So at least there's that, and when we had the conversation the other day, we've had this one a few times too, where he says, I don't feel like we had an abusive or like I was abused in any way. I said, that is where you're gaslighting yourself, because the emotional and mental manipulation, that playing in on your emotions and making you act a certain way because of that, I said, that is abuse. I said, I know it sucks to think of it as that, but until you're honest and can see it for what it is and really be able to process it through it with that acceptance, I said, you're still going to have the tendency to gaslight yourself, thinking or trying to make yourself think it was anything else. It's like, it was still something that was used to coerce you into behaving a certain way. Right? And that's kind of where it goes to shit. So yeah. I was skating today, and like a couple songs that I just listened to over and over again. The big one here recently is Falling in Reverse, Prequel. And let's see, okay, so I listen to songs over and over again. And as I'm skating, right, so my body is doing something, so my mind can wander, and, basically my mind gets distracted by what my body's doing, and it's also got this music playing, so it's like I'm honed in on what's going on at that level, and it's like there's this other level where I can, kind of casually allow my intuition to play and to think through things. So so I'm listening to the song and thinking about moving to Oklahoma, right? I was thinking, it's like, okay, so I've talked on here a few times about collaborating with my brother on something, and so that I think that's going to be the biggest thing that gets me to commit to going out there, is because I think that is something that we need to do, to have our own shared space, because there's the level in which I've been doing my own work and doing my own healing stuff, but I think it would be really beneficial to bring it into a conversation as well, and be able to bounce thoughts back and forth with the two of us, since we've had no two kids are raised in exactly the same family, right? Because they're, your birth order, and then the different things that play in on that, and all the different things that, play a role. So like, I was the youngest in a family of firstborns, right? So my dad's the oldest of 6, my mom's the oldest of 3, my brother was the oldest between the two of us. But I'm also life path 1, which speaks to the leadership end. So it's like, being the youngest kind of squashed me from trying to have any sort of leadership component in the family situation, right? Also being the daughter, because daughters are just expected to, to comply with all the family bullshit, especially, like the toxic grandfather that I've talked about a whole lot. And then, my brother was essentially, since he was the son, he had more value than I did because he was the son, right? Because the patriarchal systems want you to believe that the men are better than women, right? So women are supposed to be subservient and all that bullshit. But it's like, So he had this, it was like this unconscious level where he was deemed to be more valuable than I was, right? So just all the little layers of like all that stuff. And I think he's a life path 2, if I'm remembering correctly, and that has to do with collaborative connections and working together, I think. I have to get back to you on that one. But still, like, okay, so I've talked about the pattern app a whole lot that I use. And it's got like this hurricane thing for the image on the thing, the app. But for the free app that I use, it's got my birth chart information and stuff, and it'll pop up things that, because of the cycle that I'm in at X point or whatever, or because of these features in my birth chart, this is a cycle that I'm going through now or whatever, right? And the biggest one that always really hits home for me on that was when it popped up with, okay, I've said on here a lot that okay, in my knowings that I had in high school, my senior year, I knew Tyler was going to die in our mid-30s, and that was going to temporarily bring our group back together for a time. And then that I would be 40 before I started understanding things for myself and making sense of things for myself, right? And then this app, I don't remember exactly what it was with the cycle, but it talked about somebody with your chart. Essentially, it takes a long time before you really get to know yourself. It's like you get pulled along by the family or community environment influences around you and don't know who you are until like 40 to 41. It's like so all this stuff, all these converging elements, I'll come back to like this whole birth chart thing. So it's like, realizing how much it's like, so basically the birth chart is, divine blueprint, right? This is basically the roadmap. That's why church wants to demonize all things astrology and, all things that's anything that's not in the book, right? The book that they want you to believe is, God's house, and only whatever's in that book can give you access to God, and anything else is just wrong. It's like, no. It's like just seeing how on point all this stuff's been with like my birth chart and everything. It's like, oh, well, that fucking makes sense. No wonder I've had this issue. Or like my okay, so my North Node, which I think has to do with fate and career, if I'm remembering correctly, is in Gemini, right? So, so like learning to, because Gemini is an air sign, it's, also communication, and I think it's also closely connected to inner child. So part of my career path has to do with speaking, right? So it was always this thing where, because of, this North Node piece of my chart, I was always meant to go on this path at some level, right? But also, my Chiron placement is also in Gemini. So, that's the whole wounded healer thing. So me having to step into this level of myself with the communication and the inner child stuff, I have to heal it first and then also share it, right? So that's basically the point of my YouTube thing. So like even when I started, and I had myself psyched out to think that it was like this one thing, and that it was going to, like, I didn't know what it was supposed to be, basically. And so I just knew that I was supposed to start it. So I started it. And I was like even trying to make sense of it, and it's like, no, you're just supposed to sit down and talk to the camera. That's what you need to focus on. That's what you need to do, right? So just talk to my phone. And initially that was terrifying. Now it's not so bad because I'm pushing 300 videos, so I mean, we're doing okay. But it's like, on the things that I have said, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. Then there's something else that I come back to later, and it's like, I did know what I was supposed to be doing. I said it right there, right? And like an example of that's like the vocal media stuff that I did. I've talked about it a lot too. So in 2021, I found this vocal media page where it was basically an opportunity to start writing stuff and sharing it. And for me, that was terrifying because, the idea of putting something I created out there, that I was never supposed to do that, right? So like, I've talked about the bear picture that, within a half hour of finding out I won this contest, my parents had shit all over the moment, and I spent the rest of the day crying, right? But then I had to choose to reframe it and share it with the Wednesday night class, and take it back to be this thing that was cool for me because, hey, I won something that I wouldn't have put in for at all, because of my family, continuously telling me in various ways that I wasn't worth it, and I wasn't worthy of a win, of essentially, and then, like them hijacking that moment, my mom hijacking the moment with the drumline thing when she comes up to me after the win. I'm trying to swallow my pride to thank her for her part in the program. And the first words out of her mouth are, "I deserve this as much as you do." It's like, was I even here? Did I do anything? I thought I was one of the section leaders. I thought that actually meant something, but apparently not. So I basically walked away from the whole thing, the whole group after that, and was like, okay, that wasn't my thing. So what's my thing? Right? Anyway, the vocal media thing, it's like, okay. And even thinking about it now, when I was in undergrad, they had this Zanga.com, and I found it, and it was basically, I used it as like an online journal kind of a thing. And, my little screen name or whatever on that was like In the Back of My Mind, which was a play on a line from a Relient K song. I think the song's called Pressing On. But the line says, my problems fell out of the back of my mind. So I just named my thing In the Back of My Mind, right? So it was just kind of basically like online journaling kind of a thing. So it's like that was the first of me sharing anything with the world. But then I kind of, wandered off from that. And, by the time I got around to vocal media, like I was terrified of putting anything out there. It's like, especially things that I was especially fond of. And it goes back to, because because I loved this thing that I wrote, I was afraid somebody would fuck it up for me, because my family has a history of fucking things up for me. So it's like just making the connections and realizing it's like, oh, this has a legitimate reason. There's a legitimate reason why I have these issues blocking me from being able to truly embrace, anything that I enjoy doing, like the writing stuff, or, like all the things they did to block me from using my voice, like that whole guilt and shame thing when, my cousin started his shit and, got the whole family believing something about me, and then the whole school also, and it didn't matter what I would have said because he was the boy. So what he said was more important than what I said, right? Even though he was notoriously a liar. Okay, cool, thanks. Which again goes into chipping away at my sense of worth and value, because he's believed over me just because he's a boy, right? But anyway. I don't know what's going on Instagram right now. There's a page that responded or had a post that was kind of not a fan of Christianity kind of a thing. And I put this quote on there, and it was a Brennan Manning quote. God, I can talk. And it says, the single greatest cause of atheism in the world today is Christians who acknowledge Jesus with their lips and walk out the door and deny Jesus with their lifestyle. This is what an unbelieving world simply finds unbelievable. This line of the song, or this line from a book, was in the intro to a song by DC Talk called What If I Stumble? And I loved that song, like, hugely. I listened to it a lot. I listened to them a lot. I loved their music. But that one always stood out to me. And because of that quote, it's like there's a whole lot to this, right? So in response to what the post was, I put the quote, right? And I even said who it was from, because that's what you do with quotes. And there were a bunch of, likes on it initially. And it's like, fine, cool, whatever. I think it got up to like 50, and then it kind of chilled for a while. And now every time I get on Instagram, it's like there's more likes on that comment. It's like, holy crap. It's like, it's just kind of like taking off and doing its own thing. Right? And all I did was like put it there in the space for other people to see, right? And especially for anybody who hadn't heard that song or hadn't heard of Brennan Manning or hadn't read any of his books, any of that stuff, right? So it's a good quote and it's perfectly true. But then today, a little bit ago, somebody came back and was trying to Jesusify it. Not Jesusify it. Not even that. Churchify it. Tried to churchify it, right? Because they had to come in and throw something else about, but we're not worthy and blah, blah, blah. So, God sent his only son, blah, blah, blah. All this, blah, 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 blah. And all I said was, dude, I said, not interested. I outgrew that belief system a long time ago and I will not be returning to it. So you can just check yourself. All I did was put a freaking quote here that other people seem to agree with. And that I always agreed with, which is why it stuck with me so much, right? So, yeah. But it's like, always the Christians, man. And like, I even said on there's somebody else had a comment, and they were talking about just the different way people were reacting, especially Christians, regarding the Charlie Kirk thing. And like these people who, I think her post it was the BlackHomeEducators page. I think her post was more focused on how even Black Christians are responding to this thing that happened. And as I've said before, and there's a whole lot of people saying it, it's basically he went out with what he was putting out in the world, right? He said that in order for the Second Amendment rights to, be alive and well, he was okay with people dying, or a few people dying every year by that. And it's like, he put it out there. So that's on him, right? He was okay with the way that he was taken out, essentially. So it's just, that makes perfect sense, right? But anyway, like on the thing that, I don't remember exactly what the thing said and what her perspective on it, I think, was speaking to the Christianity problem of it, and white and Black Christians both, and even worldwide, how those that have, essentially been proselytized by the church and made to agree with it, are responding from the space that's basically looks and feels like the brainwashing, if you will, because that's basically what religion exists for, is to brainwash everybody else into thinking this is the only way. You have to have something outside of you to save you. So therefore, those that you're willing to look to for the saving are the ones actually abusing you, and you're okay with it, right? So anyway, I said something about how it's always, it's always, religion's always the problem. And I said, I won't, like when I'm spelling it now, I won't even spell Christians with like the Christ in the first part of the word. It's like I use the X because they've already took Christ out of the picture, right? The way they exist has already taken Christ out of the picture and doesn't give a shit about, what Christ's actual teachings are. It's the brainwashing of the church, because the church wants good submissive idiots to follow blindly whatever it wants them to follow and to believe. So right. So but anyway, I said one of the biggest examples of this for me that really got my attention the most, I said, was when there was the hurricane in Texas. I was still in Alabama, so it was, a lot closer to where I was then. And I was already in the process of moving my stuff to the storage unit so I could get moved out of the house with my ex. And I said, I just kept seeing on social media, it's like there was all this stuff with the hurricane, but then people were coming together and were working together to do good, to help other people, right? To raise money and to, bring together some supplies and whatever. However they could provide assistance, they were trying to find ways to do it, right? And it's like there's this whole thing and it's gaining a whole lot of traction, and along comes one of them good Christians to say, you're not supposed to let the right hand know what the left hand's doing. It's like, it's always the fucking Christians, isn't it? Right? So it's like that was one of the biggest things that really stood out to me in that time frame, because going along with me trying to disconnect from my toxic marriage situation, it's like church is the thing that told me I wasn't supposed to do this, and that I'm somehow bad because I'm trying to leave a toxic situation. Because you're supposed to want to protect the awful people at all possible costs. Like, the whole family coming together and how wonderful my grandfather was, even though he treated me like shit. It's like, and they just fell in line with, being in agreement of making me fall into place because, I was the one that would get out of line. I was the one that was too honest, that was feeling things too deeply. So it was always the me problem, right? They always put it back on how I was too much. I was too sensitive. It was a problem with me. So it's like, interesting. So yeah, divorce that whole fucking belief system. We'll never return to it. And getting much mouthier when those people come around to say the Christian things in response to something that I've said. And I'm getting mouthier, and I feel like I'm meant to lean more into that because it's bullshit. This whole, the whole fucking nation right now is a hot mess because Christians are too far in the middle of things and wanting to manipulate everybody else. Religion and politics go hand in hand. They're the number one fuck buddies all throughout history, right? And they're fucking us all over. But, they're like giving each other hand jobs under the table and all that shit. So like fucking, God, I was driving through the neighborhood on my way back from skating today, and all the flags at half-mast for like some dipshit right-wing big mouth that actively spewed hate, right? And telling people that the civil rights movement was a mistake, that anything that gave minorities of any sort any kind of a voice was a problem, right? He was one of those that was against that. So I feel if you are putting the shit out there, like my father, that's your shit to deal with. That's not on me. That is not my problem. I am not the one that is going out of my way to fucking shit on the carpet, for God's sake. It's like, I went off on him for running around the house naked too. It's like, nobody wants to see that shit. But you don't really care about anybody but yourself, do you? It's like, it's like, I'm the daughter. I'm just supposed to like bend over backwards to catering to the bullshit. Fuck that. No, I will not. Anyway. While that was very animated, I feel like I am slowing down on my things to say, and I would still like to go spend some time packing and whatnot and get some more stuff together to be moved over to the storage unit. Whether I get it there today or not, that may not happen, but at least to pack some more shit up. It's been complicated with this little corgi friend that I'm having to babysit. Although I will say, it's really nice having this available window seat to, seat by the window really, to do my videos. And rather than going down to the school and sitting in the car. So at least there's that. Or finding a random tree at the park. So it's like, it feels nice in here. And the AC is not like freezing me out today because it rained and cooled off out there a little bit. But it's supposed to be back in the upper 80s and low 90s this week. So, but I still got like a week of coming over here. So I was thinking yesterday morning, I was kind of aggravated because it's like everything that's happened this week. It's like the dog wasn't the thing that was blocking me from skating or running. But like yesterday, I woke up, it's like, excuse me, I really wanted to go running. It's like, I do have the dog to deal with it, but it's like, there's all this other stuff on top of it, right? It's not the dog itself. It's, because I could come potty her and then leave her out and go run and then come back. Because that's basically what I did today. I got ready, I came over here, pottied her, and then went and skated for 7 miles, and then picked her up on the way back home and drove through the yard since this is a one-way road. And yeah, for now. It won't always be a one way, but honestly, kind of like it that it's a one way right now, because when they open it up, it's going to be a pain in the ass to get out. Because there's the stoplight down that way, and then there's going to be a roundabout here, and so like when all the cars start coming one way, and then the roundabout doesn't slow them down very much. Otherwise, I don't know. Hopefully it won't be a nightmare. On the other hand, my aunt and uncle have the start of a neighborhood addition entrance right across from their driveway, so that'll be more of a icky thing when that comes about. Currently it's a cornfield, but quite possibly the last time it'll be a cornfield. I won't swear to that, but right now they at least put a freaking entrance for it there. So that's unfortunate, but is what it is, I guess. Anyway, I'm wrapping it up. So, as always, I appreciate you. Until the next time. See ya.